Welcome back to Crime Unveiled. Today we delve into a case that shook the American South in the early 20th century. The murder of 13-year-old Mary Phagan and the subsequent trial and conviction of Leo Frank. This case is shrouded in controversy, prejudice, and unanswered questions that continue to intrigue researchers to this day. It's a story of a young girl's life tragically cut short, a factory superintendent accused, and a community grappling with complex issues of class, religion, and social injustice. Over the next several episodes, we will meticulously dissect the details of this case, examining the historical context, the evidence presented, and the lasting impact it had on American legal history. The story begins in Atlanta, Georgia, in 1913. Mary Phagan, a bright-eyed girl working at the National Pencil Company, becomes another statistic in a grim era of industrial accidents and exploitation. She arrives at the factory on Confederate Memorial Day to collect her meager wages of $1.20, a sum hard-earned in the harsh conditions of the time. Little did she know, this seemingly ordinary Saturday would be her last.
This case is particularly disturbing due to the victim's age and the brutality of the crime. As we unfold the events of that day, listeners should be prepared for some disturbing details, though we will refrain from gratuitous descriptions. The core of our focus will be on piecing together the puzzle of what happened to Mary Phagan and how the investigation unfolded. Leo Frank, a Cornell-educated Jewish man from New York, managed the factory where Mary worked. He represents a clash of cultures in the then segregated South, a northerner in a southern city, a Jew amongst a predominantly Christian population. These cultural differences played a significant role in the public perception of Frank and, arguably, the trajectory of the trial. We will explore how these societal biases influenced the investigation and subsequent legal proceedings. It's crucial to understand the historical context to fully grasp the complexities of this case. The early 20th century South was a time of rapid social and economic change, a period marked by anxieties and prejudices that often spilled over into the justice system. The discovery of Mary Phagan's body in the factory basement set off a chain of events that would forever alter the lives of many involved. The initial investigation was chaotic and arguably compromised by a rush to judgment. The Atlanta police, under immense pressure to find the perpetrator, quickly focused their attention on Leo Frank. We'll examine the early stages of the investigation, looking at the physical evidence collected, the witness testimonies, and the growing suspicion that enveloped the factory superintendent. The narrative surrounding Frank rapidly solidified, fueled by rumors and speculation that spread like wildfire through the city. The prosecution presented a narrative that painted Frank as a sexually deviant predator who took advantage of his position of power. They relied heavily on circumstantial evidence and the testimony of a key witness, James Conley, a black janitor at the factory. Conley's statements placed Frank at the scene of the crime and implicated him in Mary's murder. However, Conley's testimony was riddled with inconsistencies and changed multiple times throughout the investigation. We will delve into the details of the trial, analyzing the prosecution's case and the questionable reliability of the testimony that ultimately led to Frank's conviction. This case raises significant questions about the integrity of the legal process and the influence of public opinion on the jury's decision.
The trial became a media sensation, capturing the attention of the entire nation. Newspapers published inflammatory articles that further fueled anti-Semitic sentiments and contributed to a highly charged atmosphere surrounding the case. The public was captivated by the sordid details and the unfolding drama of the courtroom proceedings. This intense media coverage undoubtedly played a significant role in shaping public perception and potentially influencing the outcome of the trial. We will discuss the media's role in shaping the narrative and how it contributed to the overall climate of prejudice and hysteria surrounding the case. Frank maintained his innocence throughout the trial and subsequent appeals. His defense team argued that the evidence against him was circumstantial, and that Conley, the prosecution's star witness, was the more likely perpetrator. They pointed to inconsistencies in Conley's testimony and raised questions about the reliability of the physical evidence. Despite their efforts, Frank was found guilty and sentenced to death. This verdict sparked outrage and disbelief among his supporters, who believed he was a victim of a biased legal system and widespread anti-Semitism. The case didn't end with Frank's conviction. After numerous appeals and a commutation of his sentence by the Georgia governor, a group of men abducted Frank from the state prison farm and lynched him. This act of vigilante justice shocked the nation and further solidified the case as a symbol of injustice and the dangers of prejudice. In later episodes, we will explore the aftermath of the lynching, the ongoing debate surrounding Frank's guilt or innocence, and the lasting impact of this case on American legal history and the fight for civil rights. It's a story that continues to resonate today, reminding us of the fragility of justice and the enduring power of prejudice.
Before the tragedy that shook Atlanta, the Phagan family lived a modest but peaceful life. Mary, just 14 years old, worked at the National Pencil Company factory, contributing to the family income. She was known for her gentle nature and diligence. Her co-workers later recalled her quiet demeanor and dedication to her tasks, arriving punctually each morning and meticulously completing her piecework. Life in Marietta, Georgia, at that time revolved around close-knit communities, church gatherings, and the simple rhythms of rural life. Imagine a time before the pervasive nature of automobiles, where horse-drawn carriages were commonplace, and the sounds of a bustling factory were a sign of progress. Mary's world was likely filled with the familiar faces of neighbors, the comforting aromas of home-cooked meals, and the warmth of family ties. Indeed, it's vital to establish the context of this era. The early 20th century South was a period of significant social and economic change. While cities like Atlanta were experiencing rapid industrial growth, many areas, like Marietta, maintained their traditional, small-town atmosphere. This stark contrast creates a backdrop against which Mary Phagan's story unfolds. She represented a generation caught between the old and the new. Working in a factory provided opportunities unavailable to previous generations, yet it also exposed young women to the complexities of a rapidly changing society. The routines and social fabric of small communities were being challenged by urbanization and industrialization. Reconstructing the details of Mary's daily life, her relationships, and her place within the community helps us to understand the magnitude of the disruption caused by her tragic death. Witnesses describe the Phagan family as hard-working and respectable members of their community. They attended church regularly and were known for their quiet and unassuming nature. Mary's social circle consisted primarily of family, neighbors, and colleagues from the factory. There is no record of any significant troubles or conflicts within the family. The portrait painted by those who knew them suggests a life rooted in the simple values of the time: faith, family, and hard work. Understanding this context is crucial to appreciating the devastating impact of Mary's murder on the community. It shattered the illusion of safety and tranquility in a place where such violence was rare and unthinkable, especially against a young girl like Mary. Factory records show Mary was a diligent worker, consistently meeting her production quotas. Her earnings played a vital role in supporting her family, highlighting the economic realities faced by many working-class families at the time. Child labor laws were still in their infancy, and many young people contributed to the family income out of necessity. Her job at the National Pencil Company was likely a source of both pride and responsibility for Mary. It offered a degree of independence, while also reinforcing the importance of community contribution. The factory itself became a central point in the investigation, shifting from a symbol of progress to a scene of unspeakable tragedy. Imagine a typical Saturday in Marietta. The streets would have been filled with people running errands, visiting neighbors, and attending to their weekly routines. The scent of freshly baked bread would waft from local bakeries, mingling with the earthy aroma of the nearby fields. Church bells would ring out, marking the hours and calling the faithful to worship. This was the world Mary Phagan knew. It was a world where the pace of life was slower, where neighbors knew each other by name, and where the idea of such a brutal crime occurring seemed almost impossible. The contrast between this peaceful backdrop and the horrific discovery of Mary's body in the factory basement creates a chilling juxtaposition. The details of her death, which we'll delve into later, shattered the tranquility of the community and cast a long shadow over Marietta. The image of her lifeless body, discovered amidst the machinery and dust of the factory, became a symbol of lost innocence and the vulnerability of young women in a rapidly changing world. Accounts from those who knew Mary described her as a dutiful daughter who helped her mother with household chores and enjoyed spending time with her siblings. She was often seen walking to and from the factory, exchanging greetings with neighbors along the way. These seemingly mundane details now take on a poignant significance in light of what transpired. They remind us that Mary was not just a victim, but a young girl with a life, dreams, and a place within a community that was irrevocably altered by her untimely death. The investigation that followed would expose not only the brutality of the crime itself, but also the underlying social tensions and prejudices of the era. The search for justice for Mary Phagan would become a national spectacle, captivating the nation and raising difficult questions about race, class, and the administration of justice in the early 20th century South. The idyllic image of Marietta would be forever tarnished by the shadow of this horrific crime. Let's revisit the scene at the National Pencil Company factory on that fateful Confederate Memorial Day in 1913. Mary Phagan, a 13-year-old factory girl, had come to collect her meager wages. It was a holiday, the factory largely deserted,
the air heavy with the quiet hum of machinery stilled for the day. Imagine the stark contrast of this young girl, full of life, entering the imposing brick building against the backdrop of a day meant for remembrance and quiet reflection. Her journey into the factory would be her last.
We need to hold on to this image of a peaceful spring day disrupted by an unimaginable act of violence.
The contrast itself speaks volumes. You're right to emphasize the unsettling juxtaposition. It's a jarring image. The solemnity of the holiday, the emptiness of the factory, and the innocence of Mary Phagan entering, unsuspecting. It's critical to remember the historical context here. Confederate Memorial Day held deep cultural significance in the South. It was a day for honoring the past, for reflection, for families. The violation of that day, the shattering of that peace,
Amplified the horror of the crime.
it wasn't just a murder. It was a sacrilege in the eyes of many.
This context further fueled the already intense public reaction to the crime.
Now let's focus on the factory itself. The National Pencil Company was a bustling hub of activity on regular workdays. Hundreds of workers, primarily young women like Mary, toiled within its walls. The building itself, a multi-story structure, was a labyrinth of rooms, stairwells, and corridors. On that quiet holiday, however, the usual cacophony of machinery and chatter was replaced by an eerie silence. This silence became the backdrop to a horrific event. It amplified every creak, every footstep, every unseen presence within the factory walls.
This is where the shadow begins to fall on the ordinary.
The factory's layout becomes crucial in piecing together the sequence of events.
The basement, where Mary's body was eventually discovered, was a dimly lit, isolated area. The elevator, a key element in the narrative, connected the different floors. The metal shaft, the gears, the cables, all played a silent role in this unfolding tragedy. Think about it. The metal elevator, a symbol of progress in industry, now part of a grim tableau. It's a stark representation of how quickly the ordinary can become extraordinary, how easily a space of work can transform into a scene of unimaginable horror. We know Mary Phagan arrived at the factory around noon to collect her pay of $1.20. Witnesses place her speaking briefly with Leo Frank, the factory superintendent, near his office. This seemingly mundane interaction becomes a pivotal point in the case. It's an ordinary exchange in an extraordinary set of circumstances. What was said? What was observed? These questions become central to the investigation. It is after this brief encounter that Mary Phagan disappears from view, her steps fading into the unsettling quiet of the factory. Frank's interaction with Mary Phagan is arguably the most scrutinized moment in this entire case. His demeanor, his words, his movements, all were dissected and interpreted, often through the lens of prejudice and preconceived notions. The lack of definitive clarity surrounding this interaction contributed to the swirling cloud of suspicion. It became the focal point, the moment where the ordinary day took a decisive turn towards the horrific. Let's pause for a moment and consider the broader context. Atlanta in 1913 was a city of contrasts, a growing industrial center grappling with social and economic inequalities. Tensions simmered beneath the surface, fueled by rapid change and ingrained prejudices. This backdrop adds another layer of complexity to the narrative. The murder of Mary Phagan wasn't just a singular act of violence. It became a lightning rod for these underlying tensions. You're right to emphasize the social and economic climate. The city was a melting pot of different cultures, classes, and beliefs. This diversity, while a source of dynamism, also contributed to societal friction. The case, with its complex web of accusations and conflicting narratives, became a reflection of these broader social dynamics. The shadow that fell on the National Pencil Company that day also extended its reach across the entire city. We've laid the groundwork, establishing the context of Atlanta in 1913, the societal tensions, and the factory setting where Mary Phagan and Leo Frank's paths tragically intersected. Now, we delve into the grim discovery that launched this notorious case. It was Confederate Memorial Day, April 26, 1913. Newt Lee, the night watchman at the National Pencil Factory, was making his rounds. In the early hours of the morning, likely between 3 and 4 a.m., he descended into the factory's basement. There, in the dim light, he stumbled upon something horrific: the lifeless body of 13-year-old Mary Phagan. Her face was covered in soot and dirt, indicating a struggle. This chilling discovery marked the beginning of a complex and controversial investigation, one that would grip the nation and expose deep-seated prejudices. Newt Lee's initial reaction was understandably one of shock and fear.
He immediately called the police, and within a short time, officers arrived at the factory. The scene that greeted them was disturbing. Mary Phagan's body was lying in a secluded area of the basement, near the elevator shaft. A length of cord was wrapped around her neck, suggesting strangulation. There were also signs of blunt force trauma to her head. 2 notes found near the body, seemingly written by Mary, pointed to Newt Lee as the perpetrator, further muddying the already murky waters. These notes, crudely written and containing misspellings, would become a key piece of evidence, debated and analyzed for years to come. The discovery of the body and the cryptic notes set the stage for a frantic search for answers, and the investigation quickly turned towards those who had access to the factory.
The initial investigation was, to put it mildly, chaotic. The crime scene was not properly secured, and potential evidence was compromised. The police focused their attention on Newt Lee, the night watchman, largely due to the notes found near Mary's body. He was held for questioning and subjected to intense scrutiny. However, his alibi checked out, and he was eventually released. The focus then shifted towards Leo Frank, the factory superintendent. Frank was a young, educated Jewish man from Brooklyn, a stark contrast to the working-class, largely Southern workforce he managed. This difference, combined with anti-Semitic sentiments prevalent at the time, quickly made him a prime suspect in the eyes of many. It's important to highlight the condition of the crime scene and the body when the police arrived. Mary's body was discovered in the basement, lying on her back with her clothes partially disarranged. Her face and body were covered in grime and dust, suggesting a struggle. The ligature around her neck was a piece of cord, and there were indications of a possible sexual assault, though this point remained contested throughout the trial. The 2 notes found near the body, scrawled on pieces of paper, were particularly perplexing. They contained phrases like night witch and long, tall Negro black, leading some to believe Mary Phagan was trying to identify her attacker. However, the handwriting and the language used in the notes raised questions about their authenticity and purpose. Let's talk about the timeline leading up to the discovery of Mary's body. She had arrived at the factory that morning, April 26th, to collect her pay of $1.20. It was Confederate Memorial Day, a holiday, and the factory was largely closed. She was seen speaking to Leo Frank briefly, and this interaction would become a central point of contention. Witnesses placed Frank and Mary Phagan near the office area around the time of her presumed death. After that, her movements become unclear. The lack of definitive witness accounts regarding her whereabouts between the time she collected her pay and the discovery of her body creates a crucial gap in the timeline, a gap that fueled speculation and suspicion. The investigation quickly zeroed in on a few key individuals, primarily Newt Lee and Leo Frank. Newt Lee, as the night watchman, was an immediate suspect, especially given the notes found near Mary's body. However, his alibi, corroborated by several witnesses, eventually cleared him. Leo Frank, on the other hand, became the focus of intense scrutiny. His demeanor during the initial questioning was perceived by some as nervous and evasive. He also provided conflicting accounts of his whereabouts during the time of the murder. These inconsistencies, coupled with the growing anti-Semitic sentiment in Atlanta, painted him as a suspicious figure in the eyes of the public and, crucially, the investigators. The physical evidence collected at the scene was limited by the standards of forensic science at the time. There were fingerprints and hair samples found near Mary's body, but their analysis was rudimentary, and their significance remained debated. The cord used to strangle her was examined, but it didn't definitively link to any particular individual. The notes, as we discussed, became a central piece of the puzzle, but their authorship and meaning remained ambiguous. The lack of conclusive physical evidence contributed to the reliance on circumstantial evidence and witness testimony, both of which proved to be highly subjective and open to interpretation. The investigation into Mary Phagan's murder was marked by a rush to judgment, fueled by public pressure and societal biases. The fact that Leo Frank was a Jewish man from the North, managing a factory in the South, made him an outsider in the eyes of many. This otherness, combined with the horrific nature of the crime, created a perfect storm of suspicion. The media played a significant role in shaping public perception, often portraying Frank in a negative light and highlighting the alleged inconsistencies in his statements. This media frenzy contributed to a climate of fear and prejudice, ultimately influencing the course of the investigation and the subsequent trial. The discovery of Mary Phagan's body in the National Pencil Company's basement sent a ripple of fear through Atlanta. It was Confederate Memorial Day, April 26, 1913, a day meant for remembrance and reflection, now irrevocably stained by this horrific act. The image of the young girl, bruised and lifeless,
became etched into the city's consciousness. The initial investigation, hampered by a lack of forensic techniques available at the time, focused on gathering witness statements and piecing together the timeline of Mary's last known movements. The atmosphere in the factory and the surrounding neighborhood became thick with suspicion and unease. Every worker, every passerby, became a potential suspect in the eyes of the increasingly anxious public.
The fear that gripped Atlanta wasn't just about finding Mary's killer. It stemmed from the realization that violence could erupt so suddenly, so senselessly, in a place considered safe and familiar. The National Pencil Company, a place of work and industry, was now a crime scene, a symbol of shattered security. The image of Mary's body being discovered in the basement, a dark and secluded area of the factory, further fueled the growing sense of dread. This wasn't a crime that occurred in the shadows of the city. It happened in broad daylight, within the walls of a bustling workplace. The city was grappling with the disturbing notion that danger could lurk anywhere, even in the most ordinary settings. Newspaper reports, while limited by the journalistic standards at the time, further amplified the growing fear and speculation. Headlines screamed about the brutal nature of the crime, often embellishing details and fueling public outrage. The limited information available allowed rumors to spread like wildfire, each whispered theory more sinister than the last. The lack of a clear suspect in the initial days following the murder only exacerbated the anxiety. Everyone was on edge, scrutinizing their neighbors, co-workers, and even strangers, searching for any sign of guilt or suspicious behavior. The city became a breeding ground for fear and distrust. The Phagan family's grief was palpable, adding a layer of human tragedy to the already grim narrative. Their loss resonated deeply with the community, turning the abstract fear of an unknown killer into a shared sense of sorrow and outrage. The public vigils and memorial services held for Mary served as both a testament to her life and a platform for the growing demands for justice. The cry for answers, for someone to be held accountable, grew louder with each passing day, fueled by the collective grief and fear that had enveloped the city. This collective emotional turmoil created an atmosphere ripe for speculation, suspicion, and ultimately, for the search for a scapegoat. The investigation quickly zeroed in on Leo Frank, the factory superintendent. His position of authority, coupled with his northern background and Jewish faith, made him an easy target in the prevailing climate of prejudice. While the evidence against him was circumstantial, it was enough to fuel the growing public animosity. The press, driven by the need to sell papers, and perhaps influenced by existing biases, portrayed Frank as a cold, calculating individual, further solidifying his image as the prime suspect in the public's mind. The investigation's focus on Frank seemed to provide a focal point for the fear and uncertainty that had permeated the city. He became a lightning rod for the community's anxieties, a tangible representation of the evil that had visited Atlanta. The whispers turned into accusations, the suspicions into convictions, even before the trial began. The court of public opinion had already delivered its verdict, fueled by a mix of prejudice, fear, and the desperate need for closure. The speed at which public sentiment turned against Frank is chilling. Within days of the murder, he went from being a respected businessman to the most reviled man in Atlanta. The initial shock and grief over Mary's death morphed into a targeted campaign against Frank, fueled by anti-Semitic rhetoric and a growing mob mentality. The case began to take on a life of its own, transcending the search for justice and becoming a symbol of deeper societal divisions. The fear surrounding the Phagan case extended beyond the immediate threat of a murderer at large. It tapped into existing social anxieties about race, class, and religion, creating a volatile mix of prejudice and paranoia. This fear wasn't just about a single crime. It was about the perceived disruption of the social order, the intrusion of the unknown, and the unsettling realization that even in a seemingly civilized society, such brutal acts could occur. The search for justice for Mary Phagan became intertwined with these broader societal anxieties, further complicating an already tragic and complex case. Let's delve deeper into the psychological profile of Leo Frank. He was a Cornell-educated superintendent of the National Pencil Company factory where Mary Phagan worked. He was seen by some as a stern, business-minded individual focused on efficiency and profits. Others described him as nervous, aloof, and perhaps even socially awkward. This apparent contradiction in his personality could be significant. Was he simply a demanding boss, or was there something darker lurking beneath the surface? We need to consider how these contrasting perceptions might fit into the narrative of the crime. Did his demeanor contribute to a hostile work environment? Could his perceived awkwardness have been misinterpreted as something more sinister? These questions are crucial to understanding his potential motivations and actions.
Exactly. Frank's perceived social awkwardness is a particularly interesting point. In the early 20th century, social graces and conformity were highly valued, especially within the Southern social hierarchy. An outsider, particularly a Northern Jewish intellectual like Frank, could easily be viewed with suspicion. This societal prejudice undoubtedly played a role in the public perception of Frank and likely influenced the investigation and trial.
Consider the testimonies given against him. Many were based on hearsay and character assassination, focusing on his supposed aloofness and lack of emotional display during the investigation. These factors, while not directly related to the crime itself, created a climate of suspicion around Frank that may have unfairly swayed public opinion and ultimately the jury. Let's consider the timeline of Frank's actions on the day of the murder. He arrived at the factory early, met with several employees, and then allegedly left for a brief period before returning later. His movements during this time were scrutinized intensely. Witnesses provided conflicting accounts of his whereabouts, adding another layer of complexity to the case. Some claimed to have seen him near the location where Mary Phagan's body was discovered, while others corroborated his alibi. The discrepancies in these accounts highlight the difficulty in reconstructing events, especially in a high-profile case fueled by intense public interest and media speculation. The pressure to solve the case quickly may have led to hasty conclusions and the acceptance of unreliable testimony. The inconsistencies in the timeline are indeed problematic. And let's not forget the alleged murder notes found near Mary's body. The prosecution argued that Frank wrote these notes, claiming they implicated him. However, the handwriting analysis was inconclusive, and the authorship of the notes remains disputed to this day. The fact that these notes were used as key evidence against Frank, despite the questionable nature of their origin, raises serious doubts about the fairness of the trial. Were they genuinely written by Frank in a panicked attempt to divert suspicion, or were they planted to frame him, taking advantage of the already prevalent anti-Semitism of the time? This remains a central point of contention in the case. We must also address the fact that another man, Jim Conley, the factory's janitor, also confessed to involvement in the crime. Conley's confession, however, was full of inconsistencies and changed multiple times. He initially implicated Frank, but later recanted parts of his testimony. The shifting nature of Conley's statements makes his credibility questionable. Was he coerced or influenced by law enforcement?
Was he trying to protect himself by implicating Frank? Understanding Conley's motivations is crucial to unraveling the truth, as his testimony played a significant role in Frank's conviction. The handling of Conley's testimony raises serious questions about the integrity of the investigation. The focus on Frank, despite the questionable nature of the evidence, and Conley's conflicting statements, suggests a possible rush to judgment. It appears that the investigators, influenced by public pressure and perhaps their own biases, may have prematurely settled on Frank as their primary suspect, overlooking other potential leads and failing to thoroughly investigate Conley's potential role in the crime. This tunnel vision ultimately contributed to the lingering uncertainty surrounding the case.
What strikes me is the stark contrast between Frank's outward demeanor and the heinous nature of the crime he was accused of committing. He presented himself as an educated, respectable member of the community. This image clashes sharply with the brutality of Mary Phagan's murder. This dissonance makes it even more challenging to reconcile the man with the accusations. Did the pressure of his position, the social isolation he experienced, or perhaps some unknown factor contribute to a break in his composure, leading to a horrific act of violence? This remains a central question in the case.
Precisely. The difficulty in reconciling Frank's public persona with the crime highlights the limitations of our understanding of human behavior. We are often quick to categorize individuals as either good or bad, but the reality is far more complex. People are capable of both good and evil, and sometimes the motivations behind their actions remain shrouded in mystery. The Frank case serves as a stark reminder of this complexity and the challenges we face in seeking justice and truth.
The case continues to be debated and analyzed, a testament to the enduring questions that remain.
Let's delve deeper into the investigation of Mary Phagan's murder and the subsequent trial of Leo Frank. The Atlanta Police Department faced immense pressure to solve this case quickly, given the public outcry and the horrific nature of the crime. Their initial focus, as we discussed earlier, centered around Newt Lee, the night watchman at the National Pencil Factory. His inconsistent statements and nervous demeanor aroused suspicion. However, the investigation also pursued other leads, including potential suspects seen near the factory around the time of the murder. Unfortunately, these leads seemed to dissipate quickly, perhaps due to the overwhelming focus on Lee and later Frank. It's crucial to remember that investigative techniques were less sophisticated back then, and the preservation of evidence was not as meticulous as it is today. This may have contributed to missed opportunities in the early stages. Absolutely. The pressure to find a culprit quickly can sometimes lead to tunnel vision, and this seems to have been a factor here. Beyond the initial focus on Newt Lee, the investigation also had to contend with a wave of rumors and speculation that swept through Atlanta. The media played a significant role in amplifying these rumors, often focusing on sensationalized details and contributing to a climate of fear and suspicion. This made it even more challenging for investigators to separate genuine leads from the noise. It's also worth noting that there were reports of taunting communications sent to both the police and Mary Phagan's family. These anonymous messages added another layer of complexity to the case, further fueling public anxiety and potentially diverting investigative resources. The anonymous notes are indeed a perplexing aspect of this case. Their content varied, some claiming to possess inside knowledge of the crime, while others seemed designed purely to taunt and mislead. Did these communications represent genuine attempts to aid the investigation, misguided pranks, or something more sinister? Determining their authenticity and relevance proved challenging for investigators at the time. Moreover, the investigation was marked by periods of what appeared to be progress, followed by frustrating dead ends. Witness accounts, for instance, offered glimpses of potential suspects, but these often proved unreliable or contradictory. And these false hopes further complicated the already convoluted investigation. One particular instance stands out, concerning a bloody shirt reportedly found near the factory. Initially, this seemed like a major breakthrough, a piece of physical evidence that could potentially link the crime to a specific individual. However, upon closer examination, the shirt's connection to the murder proved tenuous, and the lead ultimately went cold. Such instances of apparent progress followed by disappointment undoubtedly added to the strain on the investigation and increased public frustration with the lack of a clear resolution. We also have to consider the societal context of the time. Atlanta in 1913 was a city grappling with rapid social and economic change. Tensions between different communities were palpable, and the case of Mary Phagan, a young white girl murdered in a factory owned by a Jewish man, became tragically entangled with these broader social dynamics. This context likely influenced the direction of the investigation and the public perception of the case. Precisely. The social climate of the time undoubtedly played a significant role in shaping the narrative around the case. The image of Leo Frank, a northern Jewish factory owner, contrasted sharply with that of Mary Phagan, a young working-class girl from the South. This contrast, fueled by existing prejudices and anxieties, became a potent element in the public discourse surrounding the murder. It's crucial to acknowledge how these societal factors could have impacted both the investigation and the subsequent trial. The investigation, despite its many challenges, eventually led to the arrest and conviction of Leo Frank. However, as we'll discuss in the upcoming segments, the path to that conviction was fraught with complexities, contradictions, and lingering questions that continue to fuel debate to this day. And it is these complexities and lingering questions that make this case so compelling and so crucial to examine with a critical eye. The story of Mary Phagan and Leo Frank is not merely a historical account. It's a stark reminder of the importance of a thorough and unbiased pursuit of justice, even in the face of immense public pressure and social prejudice. The echoes of this case continue to resonate in our legal system and our understanding of justice today. The ripple effect of Mary Phagan's murder extended far beyond her immediate family. The entire city of Atlanta, particularly the Jewish community, experienced a profound sense of unease. This case, with its undercurrents of anti-Semitism, exacerbated existing societal tensions. Many Jewish residents lived in fear of reprisals, with reports of increased harassment and discrimination following Frank's conviction. This atmosphere of suspicion and distrust lingered for years, leaving an indelible scar on the city's social fabric. Even after Frank's commutation and subsequent lynching, the fear remained palpable. The case had exposed deep-seated prejudices that continued to fester beneath the surface of Atlanta society, creating a climate of anxiety that permeated daily life for many. This fear transcended generations, shaping the experiences of those who lived through the events and influencing the narratives passed down to their descendants. The Phagan family's grief was compounded by the intense public scrutiny and the protracted legal proceedings. Imagine losing a child in such a horrific manner and then having your family thrust into the national spotlight, your grief dissected and debated in newspapers and public forums. The constant rehashing of the details, the relentless speculation surrounding the case, only served to intensify their pain. Their search for justice became intertwined with the broader social and political currents of the time, further complicating their mourning process. They were not simply grieving the loss of Mary, but also navigating a complex legal battle and enduring public scrutiny that often felt intrusive and insensitive. The trauma of Mary's death and its aftermath undoubtedly cast a long shadow over the Phagan family, impacting them for generations to come.
The emotional toll on the Frank family was equally devastating. Facing accusations of such a heinous crime, Leo Frank endured public vilification and social ostracization. His family stood by him throughout the ordeal, grappling with the accusations, the trial, the appeals, and ultimately, the devastating outcome. They were subjected to immense pressure and scrutiny, living under the shadow of suspicion. Even after Frank's death, the stigma associated with the case persisted, impacting future generations of the Frank family. The emotional scars of this experience ran deep, leaving lasting wounds of injustice, grief, and loss. They not only lost a husband, a son, a brother, but they also lost their sense of security and belonging within the community. The case created deep divisions within the Atlanta community, pitting neighbor against neighbor. The trial itself became a spectacle, with fervent supporters on both sides clashing outside the courthouse. This polarization further fueled the emotional turmoil within the city. The divisions weren't simply about guilt or innocence. They reflected deeper societal tensions related to class, religion, and race. The trial became a proxy for these broader conflicts, exacerbating existing prejudices and creating an atmosphere of fear and mistrust that lingered long after the verdict was delivered. The case served as a stark reminder of the fragility of social cohesion and the devastating consequences of unchecked prejudice.
This sense of unease wasn't confined to Atlanta. The case garnered national attention, sparking debates about justice, anti-Semitism, and the influence of public opinion on legal proceedings. The sensationalized media coverage further fueled public fascination with the case, contributing to the emotional intensity surrounding it. Newspapers across the country published articles detailing the crime, the trial, and the subsequent appeals, shaping public perception and influencing the narrative surrounding the case. This widespread attention amplified the emotional impact of the case, extending its reach far beyond the confines of Atlanta. The long-term trauma associated with this case is evident in the continued interest and debate surrounding it. Even today, over a century later, the murder of Mary Phagan and the trial of Leo Frank remain subjects of intense scrutiny. Books, documentaries, and podcasts continue to explore the intricacies of the case, examining the evidence, the legal proceedings, and the social context. This enduring fascination underscores the profound impact of the case, not just on the individuals directly involved, but on the collective consciousness of the nation.
The case became a cautionary tale, highlighting the dangers of prejudice, the power of public opinion, and the fragility of justice. It demonstrated how easily societal tensions can be exploited to manipulate public perception and influence legal outcomes. The legacy of the case serves as a reminder of the importance of vigilance in safeguarding against prejudice and ensuring fair and impartial justice for all. It also underscores the crucial role of responsible journalism in avoiding sensationalism and contributing to a balanced and informed public discourse. The case continues to generate debate and discussion, raising important questions about the legal system and the role of social context in shaping perceptions of guilt and innocence. It underscores the need for ongoing reflection on how societal biases can influence legal proceedings and the importance of striving for a more just and equitable system. The story of Mary Phagan and Leo Frank remains a stark reminder of the enduring power of prejudice and the importance of seeking truth and justice, even in the face of societal pressure. We left off with the perplexing inconsistencies in Frank's statements and his odd behavior on the day of the murder. Let's delve deeper into the investigation's focus on Frank, particularly concerning the timeline he provided. He claimed to have been in his office continuously from noon until after Mary Phagan's body was discovered. However, several witnesses came forward with testimonies that contradicted his account, placing him in different areas of the factory at times that conflicted with his alibi. The testimonies, while individually perhaps not conclusive, collectively cast a shadow of doubt over Frank's story. The investigation was meticulously piecing together a puzzle, and these discrepancies were significant pieces. The emerging discrepancies in Frank's timeline were indeed critical. The initial suspicion was further fueled by the discovery of 2 notes found near Mary Phagan's body. These notes, seemingly written by Mary herself, contained details about meeting someone and going to the metal room. The prosecution argued that these notes implicated Frank, suggesting he had lured Mary to the basement where she was murdered. The defense, of course, vehemently contested this interpretation, suggesting the notes were either not written by Mary
or were misinterpreted. This became a central point of contention in the trial, with handwriting experts brought in from both sides to analyze and interpret the cryptic messages. The notes added another layer of complexity to the already convoluted case. The investigation also scrutinized Frank's demeanor and actions during the initial inquiries. Witnesses described him as strangely detached and unemotional, which struck some as unusual given the horrific nature of the crime. His apparent lack of concern and his seeming reluctance to actively participate in the search for Mary further raised suspicions. While not direct evidence of guilt, these behavioral observations contributed to the growing sense that Frank was concealing something. The pressure on him was mounting, and the investigators were becoming increasingly convinced of his involvement. The turning point in the investigation came with the testimony of James Conley, a sweeper at the National Pencil Factory. Conley, an African-American man with a criminal record, initially denied any knowledge of the murder. However, he later changed his story, claiming he had helped Frank dispose of Mary Phagan's body. Conley's testimony provided a graphic and detailed account of the events, placing Frank directly at the scene of the crime. This was the breakthrough the prosecution had been waiting for. Conley's testimony was undeniably a pivotal moment in the case, but it was not without its problems. His initial denials and subsequent confession, coupled with his criminal history, raised questions about his credibility. The defense argued that Conley himself was the perpetrator, attempting to shift the blame onto Frank. Despite these concerns, Conley's detailed account, which aligned with certain aspects of the physical evidence, significantly strengthened the case against Frank. With Conley's testimony and the mounting circumstantial evidence, the authorities felt they had enough to proceed. On April 29, 1913, just a few days after Mary Phagan's body was discovered, Leo Frank was arrested and charged with her murder. The arrest sent shockwaves through Atlanta, dividing the city along lines of class, religion, and race. The stage was set for a trial that would become one of the most sensational and controversial in American history. The arrest of Leo Frank marked a critical juncture in the case. The circumstantial evidence, the contested notes, the conflicting testimonies, and the problematic but compelling testimony of James Conley all culminated in this pivotal moment. What began as a horrific discovery in a factory basement had rapidly escalated into a complex and deeply divisive legal battle. And as we move into the next and final part of this series, we'll examine the trial itself, the verdict, and the enduring legacy of the Leo Frank case. A case that continues to generate debate and raise questions about justice, prejudice, and the power of public opinion. So we arrive at the end of our exploration of Mary Phagan's murder and the subsequent trial and conviction of Leo Frank. We've meticulously examined the evidence, scrutinized the testimonies, and delved into the societal context of Atlanta in 1913. Despite the passage of over a century, this case remains shrouded in ambiguity, a chilling reminder of the imperfections of our justice system and the destructive power of prejudice. Leo Frank, a Jewish man in the South, became a scapegoat, convicted in a climate of fear and anti-Semitism. The evidence against him was largely circumstantial, reliant on the testimony of Jim Conley, a known liar and likely the true perpetrator. The lynching of Frank, after his sentence was commuted, added another layer of tragedy to this already complex case. Indeed, the case of Leo Frank highlights the dangers of a rush to judgment fueled by societal biases. The media played a significant role in shaping public opinion, portraying Frank as a stereotypical villain, preying on a young, innocent girl. The prosecution, eager for a conviction, seized upon this narrative, presenting a case heavily reliant on conjecture and emotionally charged rhetoric. They effectively ignored the inconsistencies in Conley's testimony and dismissed the possibility of other suspects. The defense, while presenting counterarguments, was ultimately unable to overcome the pervasive anti-Semitism that permeated the courtroom and the community. This case serves as a grim cautionary tale about the fragility of justice when prejudice holds sway. The commutation of Frank's sentence by Governor Slayton, based on his own doubts about Frank's guilt, further inflamed public sentiment. This act, intended to ensure justice, ultimately led to Frank's abduction and lynching, a grotesque display of mob violence. Slayton, convinced of the miscarriage of justice, sacrificed his political career and reputation in an attempt to uphold the principles of law and fairness. His actions, while controversial at the time, underscore the importance of seeking truth and resisting the pressures of public opinion. The subsequent posthumous pardon of Frank in 1986, though decades late, offered a measure of official recognition of the injustices he suffered. The story of Mary Phagan is a tragedy compounded by another tragedy, the wrongful conviction and subsequent lynching of Leo Frank. This case exposes the dark underbelly of prejudice and the devastating consequences it can have on individuals and society as a whole. It forces us to confront the uncomfortable reality that sometimes the most heinous crimes are committed not in dark alleys, but in the bright light of day, fueled by hatred and fear. The injustice inflicted upon Leo Frank continues to resonate today, a somber reminder of the importance of vigilance and the pursuit of truth in the face of prejudice. Looking back, it's almost unbelievable how easily the narrative shifted from finding the true killer to focusing on a convenient scapegoat. The speed at which public opinion turned against Frank is a chilling testament to the power of suggestion and the susceptibility of communities to mass hysteria. It's a stark reminder of how quickly individuals can become swept up in a wave of prejudice, leading to devastating consequences for innocent lives. The questions surrounding Mary Phagan's murder remain. Who truly committed this heinous crime? And how can we prevent similar miscarriages of justice from occurring in the future? This case is a stain on the fabric of American justice. It serves as a stark reminder of the vulnerability of minority groups in the face of prejudice and the potential for manipulation within the legal system. It forces us to question the very foundations of justice and the safeguards we have in place to protect the innocent. It's a case that should be studied and revisited, not only for its historical significance, but also for the lessons it offers about the dangers of societal prejudice and the importance of upholding the principles of due process.
What haunts me most is the thought that someone got away with murder. While Frank's innocence seems increasingly clear, the true perpetrator likely walked free, their identity lost to the passage of time and the chaotic aftermath of the trial. This case, though over a century old, remains a chilling reminder that justice is not always served, and sometimes the truth remains elusive. And the most unsettling aspect of this case is the realization that such a tragedy could happen again. The conditions that led to the miscarriage of justice in 1913, prejudice, fear, and a rush to judgment, still exist today. The case of Leo Frank serves as a potent warning, urging us to be vigilant against these forces and to strive for a justice system that is truly blind to prejudice and committed to the pursuit of truth, no matter how uncomfortable it may be. It leaves us with a chilling question: what evils might be hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right conditions to flourish? Thank you for walking with us through the shadows. The story doesn't end here. It lingers, echoing through time, reminding us that the darkest truths often hide in plain sight. Until next time, stay curious and stay vigilant. Goodbye.